Hello friends, in the series which we are doing on history of India from 1750s to 1857, today we'll talk about the evolution of law and the colonial codes. As we all of us are aware that the way British they came to India and how they tried to impose various kinds of laws on Indian population and various kinds of charter acts, they were also being initiated beginning from the Regulating Act of 1773, thereafter the Pitt's India Act of 1784. We also find charters of 1793, 1813, 1833 and 1853. So all these kinds of charter acts, they brought certain kind of legislation with regard to the Indian affairs, and various kinds of laws they were also being framed so that British they were able to rule India in a better way. So the main concern with regard to the colonial codes and the evolution of law in India, the way they wanted to control the Indian population through the various kinds of legislation, and their main aim was in the context of their economic as well as the political dominance. They wanted to extract as much as possible from the economic point of view, and at the same time they wanted to establish their political hegemony. So in a way the laws they helped them to establish their political hegemony. If you want to see the references, then Thomas Metcalfe's Ideologies of the Raj, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's From Palasi to Partition, A History of Modern India, B.L. Grover, An Introduction to Modern India, and NCERT and IGNOU material. So these are some of the readings which you can refer when you are talking about the evolution of law and the colonial codes in India. And we at the same time we find that the way they try to use the ideology and the various kind of ideological trends beginning from Orientalism, evangelicalism, utilitarianism. So all these kinds of ideas and ideological trends, they are being used by the British to in a way increase their dominance in India. And when we see that how British they wanted to present themselves, then we find that they were trying to present themselves as the people those who are modern in nature, and on the other hand when you are trying to project yourself as modern, then you have to show that others they are primitive in nature in some way. So British they wanted to present themselves as the people those who are more progressive in nature, and on the other hand the people those who are though not progressive from the British point of view, they were referred to as savage or primitive in nature. So this kind of positioning which was being done by the British, it was done not only in India but in other parts of the world as well, where they wanted to project their own superiority. And what we also find during this period that British they use different kinds of deceit and treachery methods so that they are able to establish their supremacy in India. At the same time, in the different fields including law, we find that British they had this kind of a tendency where the ideas of racialism or race becomes dominant for them, and all this was being done in the garb of ideology, because ideology was being shown, as I told you, that in the context of evangelicalism or utilitarianism, all these kinds of ideological trends in Britain, they were being used in India. And when we tend to understand the kind of greed from the economic point of view which the British had, and at the same time their economic interests they also dominated. So what we have to understand is that whatever steps which British took in India with regard to the law, they were colored by their own ideas of race, and they believed that Indians they had to be ruled by them, that they were the people those who were in a way efficient schoolmasters, and Indians they had to be controlled by this kind of a policy which they had in their minds. And for that I told you that various kinds of acts and charters they came during this period, and British they felt that when East India Company came, that how they had to control the Indian resources for their own purposes or for their own use. And initially we may find that they had certain kind of respect for the Indian traditions, but over a period of time they wanted to in a way control Indians and impose European ideals in different way, and they also wanted that some kind of a flow of the revenue should take place for the British, and that is why we find that the permanent settlement and the various kinds of revenue settlements, they were being imposed on the Indians. And when we try to understand the colonial rule, we find that the Regulating Act, which came in 1773, it officially acknowledged that it was the right of the Parliament to manage the Indian affairs, and the Court of Directors of the East India Company, they were obliged to put forward all communications received from Bengal about the revenue, military and civil affairs in India to the British government. So through these kinds of acts, we find, beginning from the Regulating Act in 1773, we find that the British, they were trying to control India. And thereafter we find that another act, the Pitt's India Act in 1784, it came, and as you can see on the screen as well, that it increased the government control over the East India Company's public affairs and its administration in India. And a board of control was also established to superintend, direct and control all the acts, operations and concerns which were connected to the civil or military government or revenues of British territorial possessions in East Indies. So we find that these kinds of acts, which when they came, for example the Pitt's India Act in 1784, so the board of control now had comparatively more power over the Court of Directors, which was there with regard to the East India Company, and the board of control, it gained more dominance, and the decisions of the board of the control, they were binding on the Court of Directors. And when we tend to understand all these aspects in the various ideological strands, we find that Edward Said, he talks about Orientalism as some kind of knowledge which is thrust from above through the power of the Europeans, and how British or the Europeans, they wanted to dominate the natives or the Asians or the people, those who were in other parts of the world which were not in Europe. So this was the kind of idea with regard to Orientalism. And Eugene Nestick talks about that how the some kind of knowledge which was being produced through a process of dialogue in which colonial officials, Indian commentators and the native informants, they participated in a collaborative intellectual exercise. So we find that how Europeans as well as Indians, they came together in some way, and how they were trying to create some kind of an information, and this information would be very helpful for the British, because if they would come to know about India and its traditions and practices, then they would be able to control Indians in a much better manner. So British, they were trying to legitimize themselves in some way, and for this kind of a legitimacy they had to in a way learn about Indian traditions, cultures and laws, etc. So British, they in a way wanted that if they will impose, if they will bring about good laws, then in a way the ideas which were there with regard to the freeing of the individuals from the ideas of despotism and customs and traditions, this will also happen, and individual rights and ownership, all these kinds of ideas, they will also come to the fore. And that is how various ideological strands which we find during the colonial period, they wanted that how they have to create such kind of a system or such kind of an administration in those areas which have been conquered by the British, so they are able to create some kind of a unitary or uniform kind of a system of administration. And we find that utilitarians, they also advocated the idea of rule of law. So these kinds of things, they were happening at that point of time, and the ideological strands, they were in a way trying to extract as much as possible from the different countries which were being colonized by the British. And in this enterprise, we find that the industrial revolution which had taken place in Britain, it had also played an important role. And till 1813, we find that the East India Company was avoiding any kind of intervention from that perspective, but keeping a vigilant eye on extracting the agricultural surplus, because from 1793 onwards, when the permanent settlement was introduced, and thereafter how British, they were trying to control the different economic aspects which were associated in India. And we find that the kind of changes which were coming during this period, that the ideological pressure of evangelical and utilitarian, how they created this kind of ideological pressure, and the objectives of the utilitarians were not much different from the people, those who wanted free trade in India. And similarly, evangelicals, they also wanted to come to India, that how the Christian missionaries they should come to India, and they in a way try to propagate the ideas of Christianity. And at the same time, when Indians, they will adopt Christianity and the British traditions and the practices, then they will be more they will have this kind of an idea where they will be more convenient to use the British products which will be sent from Britain to India. And these kind of changes we find during this period, that the free trade lobby it did not want that the East India Company should in a way have some kind of a monopoly over India as well as other areas where the East India Company had trade monopolies. So during this period, we also find in the early part of the 19th century that various kinds of monopolies which were being exercised by the East India Company, they were being taken away by the government in Britain. And industrial revolution basically wanted that the raw materials from India they should be in a way sent to Britain, and at the same time they wanted to send the finished products from Britain to India. So this kind of a trade where the agricultural products from India, they will be sent to Britain, and the finished products which are made in the British factories, they will come to India. So this was the kind of idea which the British policy makers or they wanted, and that is how they imposed these kind of ideas on Indians. So we find that how the industrial revolution, it had some kind of an unequivocal assertion of the sovereignty, and it wanted greater penetration in the economy and society, and the control over the Indian trade, not only with Britain but also with other countries as well. So these were the kinds of the needs which the industrial revolution had, and they wanted that when the demands of the industrial revolution will be met in the different parts of the world, then the British economy will in a way progress in a comparatively more faster manner. So the economic sovereignty of the British was also linked to the political sovereignty, that how they increased their territorial possessions in India. And when they will increase their territorial possessions, then they will also gain some kind of an economic aspects which were associated with that. They will also be able to gain them. So we find that British, they in a way wanted to gain some kind of a direct control over the territories which they had possessed in India. And over a period of time, with the establishment, with the sending of the resident British resident to the Indian courts, where Indian rulers, they were ruling, they were trying to control those kinds of courts. And if we see the contribution of the various governors or later governor generals, those who were appointed, then we find that Warren Hastings, he decided to take the full control of the justice system, and he reasoned that the people would be accustomed to East India Company's sovereignty. So we find that the administrators, those who were sent to India, they initiated such kind of reforms in the Indian system with the kind of for example, the Regulating Act which came during Warren Hastings, and how Supreme Court was established in Calcutta with Elijah Impey as the Chief Justice. So these kinds of new things, they were also being initiated, and we find that in a way they had two courts in each district, a civil court or a Diwani Adalat, and a criminal court or Fauzdari Adalat. So this kind of a system which came where the civil court will talk about the issues of revenue, which was a Diwani Adalat, and criminal court will talk about the Fauzdari or the criminal offences. So this kind of a thing, it was initiated, and we find that when we tend to understand that what kind of laws they were being applied, then we find that the Muslim laws in the criminal justice, they were being implied for the Muslims, and Hindu laws, they were being implied in the personal matters which concerned about inheritance and marriage. So these kinds of laws, the way they were being applied in the criminal system, we find that criminal justice, the Muslim laws, they were being applicable, and the Muslim or the Hindu laws, both of them, they were applicable in the personal matters with regard to the inheritance and marriage. So this is how the system, it was in a way applied. And when you try to divide these kind of topics, then they were also related to the British system, where they wanted to demarcate the laws in such a way that they were being seen in the context of the criminal as well as civil laws. And we see in the context of the courts during this period that civil courts in India, they were to be presided over by the European district collectors, and they were to be assisted by the Maulvis and the Brahman Pandits, those who were interpreting the indigenous laws for their understanding. And an appeal court in Calcutta was also established, which too would be presided over by the president and the 2 members of the council. So these were some of the kind of changes which were being initiated by the British during this period, and how we see that the European district collectors, they were in a way presiding over the civil courts in India. And the kind of help which was being given to them, it was given by the Brahmins as well as Brahman Pandits as well as the Maulvis, those who were trying to those who were interpreting such kind of laws for an understanding of these persons. We also find that in the context of the criminal codes, they were to be under a Qazi and a Mufti, and they were to be supervised by the European collectors. And when we try to understand the kind of plans which were initiated by the Hastings and Sir Elijah Impey, who was the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court, and these district collectors, they were being divested of their judicial duties. So we find that they tried to bring some kind of changes during this period, and they also created the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was in a way trying to was the highest body which would look into the matters which came from the lower courts to it. And we also find that during this period some kind of judicial reforms, the way they were being initiated, they were more concerned with the idea of Europeanization, that how reforms, they should be initiated in such a way that Europeanization takes place. And another trend which we also see during this period was towards the systematization of the civil justice system. So these kind of reforms in the context of the judiciary, we see that Europeans, they were trying to project their own dominance in some way, and the kind of changes which they brought about were keeping in mind the kind of dominance which they had in their own mind. And we also find that some kind of rules and regulations in the various codes, especially they came through the Code of 1781, and they were to be followed in all civil courts down to the lowest levels, and all judicial orders were henceforth to be in writing. So these kind of codes, when they came, especially the Code of 1781 which came, and thereafter we also find that some kind of problems, they were also being encountered during this time, that how there were various interpretations of the laws. So these various interpretations of the laws, where you find that different people, different Pandits for example, or Maulvis, they had different interpretations of such laws. So this was one of the major problems, and to reduce this kind of a problem, committee of 11 Pandits, it was formed during Warren Hastings, and they compiled a digest of the Hindu laws in 1775, and it was translated by N.B. Halhed in 1776. for the purpose of lessening the dependence of the European judges on their indigenous interpreters. Similarly, a code of Muslim laws was also compiled by 1778. So remove any kind of misunderstanding where you had different kind of interpretations by the different learned people. Such kind of digest of laws, they were being created during the time of Warren Hastings, so that there is more uniformity in terms of the application of the laws. So that was being done during the times of Warren Hastings, and later we also find that some kind of changes they come during the times of Cornwallis as well. And the different kinds of charter acts during this period, they also in a way open up the Indian economy and society for the arrival of the British in different ways. And we find that how with the coming of these kinds of new laws, we find that a system where lawyers etc. they became more important during this point of time, which was not the case earlier. And some kind of a reversal takes place in 1787 during this period, when we find that collector was given the duty of administering the civil system at this point of time. And during the times of Hastings, we find that the laws, they were comparatively more and more standardized, and the practice of law, it needed more professional expertise. And this kind of professional expertise could be seen from a trained group of people, as I told you, lawyers, those who were the trained group of people during this point of time. And we also find that the kind of reforms which were being brought during the times of Hastings, they tended to centralize the judicial authority and reduce administration to a system. So the focus of the governors or the governor generals during this period, we find that especially Cornwallis, who wanted to bring more and more Anglicization, and Hastings, who was for a comparatively very longer period of time, and who came for a very long period of time, and he also brought the kind of changes during this period. So when we try to in a way summarize during this period that the kind of changes which took place in the context of the laws in the colonial codes, then the British, the kind of intentions which they had, as you can see in the retrospect, that you had to see the British intentions and the various kind of changes in the context of the Regulating Act, and the part which was played by the Warren Hastings, the kind of pressures in the framework of the evangelicalism and the utilitarianism which were designed to serve the British needs, and the other charter acts which we will discuss in our next lecture, where we will talk about the other charter acts which were initiated beginning from 1793 onwards, where we find that the kind of changes which were brought about during these charter acts, they brought some kind of a major impact on the Indian society, Indian political economy, and Indian culture as well. So I'd like to end the discussion here. Thank you.